Hi, my name is Sidney Dekker, and we're talking about the Field Guide to Understanding Human Error, one of my books. This is the third installment. And where we are now is to start thinking about how do new view investigations look? What types of things do they typically look at and produce? All right, so let's just revisit the ideas of the new view. New view says that human error is not a cause of failure. It is the effect or symptom of trouble deeper inside your system. Human error isn't random, it isn't just some brain blooper. No, it is systematically connected to features of your people's tools and tasks, all right? And based on those tools and tasks, you can probably predict where things are going to go right and wrong. Not when, but probably how, all right? And finally, human error in a new view is never the conclusion of an investigation. It is the starting point. It is where you begin, okay? That should be pretty stable by now. Now, what does that mean for errors? How does the new view look at human error? In a sense, it sees error as an opportunity, as a window on a problem that all practitioners might well have, that might be quite common in your system. You may not know about it, but this is just a manifestation of something that is deeper in your system that you should probably know about. It is a good and interesting and important marker in the behavior, the everyday behavior of your system. It's an opportunity to learn about organizational, operational, and technological features that create the error potential. In other words, error is an opportunity. It's the starting point for you to learn, not the stopping point for you to say who went wrong and that's the end of the story. No, it's the starting point. One really important principle that is foundational to new view thinking is called the local rationality principle. Now, there is a lot of research around this and literature. I'm not going to get into that. I'll just limit myself to this very, very short description of it. The local rationality principle says that people do reasonable things, or they do what makes sense to them at the time, given their goals, given the knowledge that they have, and given the focus of their attention. All right? They do what makes sense to them at the time, given those three. Now that's an interesting starting point because that allows you to start looking at those things in your investigation. Well, what were people's goals? What multiple things were they trying to achieve at the same time? Yes, they wanted to land the plane safely, but they also had scheduling pressures. Yes, they wanted to get the train to the station, but there was also really bad weather that they had to negotiate. So there's various goals that are active at the same time. What was people's knowledge? Did they actually know about these particular failure modes in the system? Were they aware of that? Were they trained in them? And how was that training? Is that knowledge that other practitioners have stable in the head, or is it just something they are able to produce in the classroom or on an exam, but never really in practice because it never shows up that way? Ask those questions about knowledge. And then what was their focus of attention? Attention is, of course, driven by people's goals and by their knowledge, but also by the environment as a complex product of all of those three. And try to trace where they were looking and why, okay? With that in mind, you can really start to trace back and walk this back into the operation and organization and find reasons why people get themselves in those situations where what they're doing makes sense to them at the time. The local rationality principle has another way of letting itself be advertised, and that's like this. It really says that nobody comes to work to do a bad job. And this is an important assumption. You have to assume that people come to work to do a good job. Now, what a good job means can be negotiated, obviously, but in many cases, a good job means a good job for the organization. It is fascinating to see in studying real practice that people are concerned about the goals the organization has, right? They want to get the plane on the ground, not because of their own schedules, because they're going to lay over in some hotel anyway. No, they're concerned about the organization's goals, right? So they don't come to work to do a bad job. They come to work to do a good job. Thus, what they do makes sense given that fundamental assumption. What are typical new view countermeasures as opposed to old view countermeasures, which we talked about previously? New view countermeasures are typically not about individual practitioners because the errors that they gave rise to or made visible tell something about everybody else and tell something about the operation and organization from which they stem. They are problems that may occur all over the place or in that particular situation to other practitioners as well. New view countermeasures also don't rely on tighter or more procedures. Because they understand that systems are complex, they're often in part non-deterministic, which means that people need some discretion, some autonomy, some self-determination to deal with complex, dynamic, multi-goal settings. Right? New view investigations avoid getting trapped in the promises of new technology. Often you get new technology by vendors and by others that makes these promises about an error-free future, that if only you have this technology or this piece of automation in your system, then you won't suffer this type of pathway to failure. Those promises may be true or not true or very difficult to demonstrate. But what the research has shown, as I've said before, is that new technology creates new human work. And new human work creates new opportunities for things to go both right and wrong. All right? It can express both expertise and error and thus contribute to new pathways to failure, which were often or almost never foreseen by those who vend the technology. In fact, when you look at new view investigations, the countermeasures often try to address the deeper systems issues underneath the production of error, underneath the production of failure. What are the operational decisions or the organizational conditions and cultures and technological features that surround the work that people do? That's where they focus because they understand, new view investigations understand, that that's where you need to go in order to get the return on investment of the investigation. That's where you need to make the changes so that they are wholesale enough to benefit all of your practitioners. Don't just focus on the single bad apple, focus on the system that produced the behavior. All right? So remember, the point of a new view investigation is to understand why people's assessments and actions made sense to them at the time, given their context. All right? The point is not to show what they should have done. Okay? So far, so good. Hope to see you back when we talk about reactions to failure that often get in the way of doing a new view investigation.